who I've known for 36 years, I wrote about him becoming president in 1988, knows nothing. He's appallingly ignorant, and he's a con artist. He's the most masterful con artist I've ever seen, and I've exposed lots of con artists over my long career. This election result is surprising. On the other hand, America is a country now where half of adults read at the level of a fifth grade.
The spectacle of Donald Trump's presidency has taken many forms, but seriousness has rarely been one of them. David Cay Johnston, drawing on decades of expertise uncovering the hidden layers of power and finance, steps in not just to critique, but to cut through the illusion. In his view, Trump isn't the strong man he pretends to be, but a figure ensnared in the very myths he peddles. While the crowds cheer, Johnston records, and what emerges is not a portrait of victory, but a ledger of failure disguised as strength.
Well, this has been embarrassing. I don't know how else to put it. Donald Trump, as I've said on your show many times, has no idea what he's doing. He believes he's this great, stable genius, the world's most important person. He should be in charge of everything. And he just doesn't know.
Johnston's takedown is sharp, relentless, and far more humorous than Trump could ever anticipate, because the president himself delivers the punchlines with each new contradiction and blunder. Johnston doesn't exaggerate, he simply highlights the flaws, and suddenly the entire facade resembles a flimsy carnival booth on the verge of collapse. There is nothing noble in this drama, nothing grand in this legacy. It is absurd theater unfolding in real time, scripted by a man consumed by his own illusion.
Grown up under this monster of a father to Donald Trump, you can't lose. And if you lose, you certainly can't admit you lose. And bad enough to lose in 2020 to another old white guy, but losing to a black East Indian woman, to Donald, that is just as humiliating as anything could possibly be. And that he's running scared is very clear from his immediate announcement that he wasn't going to debate her. Kamala has announced she will show up at the debate whether Trump does or not.
Johnston starts where Trump most dreads: attention, his finances. To many Americans, the president's business empire was packaged as a glittering success, but Johnston strips away the shine to reveal a hall of mirrors propped up by debt, tax evasions, and inflated branding. The so-called mogul isn't a titan of capitalism at all, but a master of borrowing money with no intention of paying it back. Deals Trump once paraded as victories emerge, under Johnston's scrutiny, as reckless gambles. The self-proclaimed genius is recast as a man who could bankrupt a lemonade stand while persuading the crowd he invented citrus.
He's using the exact same strategy that he always does, David. Try to claim that something he is being accused of doing is really him standing up for you, the little guy. Your thoughts on this?
Well, nobody at the Wall Street Journal, from Rupert Murdoch on down, is going to lose 1 second of sleep over the lawsuit threats. And the size of the damages he's asked for are irrelevant. You can ask for any ridiculous amount of money.
The tax returns, the shell companies, the endless loans. Johnston follows them like a detective tracking footprints in the sand. What he uncovers isn't brilliance, but desperation. A relentless need to inflate numbers just to sustain the illusion of success. He portrays Trump as a magician, tugging scarves from an empty hat, dazzling only those unwilling to look too closely. But the spectacle unravels the moment the tricks are exposed. Suddenly, the president seems less a business mogul and more a con artist who stumbled into the White House with illusions too stale to impress.
The Middle East interests have put, I believe it's $2 billion into cryptocurrencies. One country alone, 300 million. There are people who have been established as money launderers, whom Trump is getting money from now. And of course, Trump has pardoned in the last 100 and some days a whole bunch of serious criminals, not just the people who attacked police and tried to overthrow the government on January 6th, but the guy who ran the Silk Road, which was a way for both drug traffickers and terrorists to move money, people who were major drug.
And then comes the fixation on gold-plated excess. Johnston underscores how Trump mistakes shine for worth, confusing gaudiness with greatness. To him, layering something in gold leaf is proof of power. Johnston mocks the insecurity dripping from every gilded chair and chandelier, pointing out how the decor exposes the fragility beneath the bravado. True confidence doesn't need constant ornamentation, but Trump's world is built on glitter instead of substance. He comes across as a man shouting his importance through furniture because his record cannot speak for him.
Refer to this being a constitutional matter, Trump's claim to immunity. There is a reasonable argument for some protections that the executive should have.
Sure, the courts have held that you can hold off the trial of a civil matter, but the court said you can't hold off giving your testimony. And when Trump tried to not testify, Chief Justice of the United States, John Roberts, wrote the opinion that begins by saying the courts are entitled to every man's testimony.
Johnston doesn't stop at finances. He pulls back the curtain on Trump's endless lawsuits, showing a president who isn't a defender of law and order, but a serial litigator using courts for delay and intimidation. The hypocrisy is glaring, a man railing against frivolous cases while drowning in them himself. Each lawsuit exposes a businessman who hides behind loopholes because his deals can't stand on their own. Johnston highlights the contradictions. A leader who brands himself as the voice of forgotten workers, yet cheats contractors, underpays staff, and outsources jobs for profit. The self-styled populist is revealed as the everyman's worst employer.
Donald has no understanding of that. If we could sit Donald down and say, would you tell us as President of the United States the difference between I'm sorry, I'm being tongue-tied, a Sunni and a Shia and why it's important? Donald couldn't tell you that. He has not a clue. This is a man who didn't know what happened at Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941, who thought Finland was an oblast, a state, essentially, or province of Russia, who thought Frederick Douglass, who's buried a few miles from my house, was still alive 130 years after he was put in the ground.
Right.
I mean, Donald is appalled.
Johnston makes it brutally clear that Trump's real success isn't building wealth, but selling the illusion of it. Decades of branding turned his name into a product, but Johnston reveals how empty that product is. Hotels, steaks, ties, every venture crumbles under scrutiny, yet the brand survives, fueled by a public hungry for the myth of success. Johnston mocks a president whose greatest achievement is stamping his name on other people's work and calling it empire. The brand isn't strength, it's camouflage. Strip it away, and the mogul vanishes, leaving only a salesman clutching slogans. And slogans are what Johnston dismantles next, from "Make America Great Again" to every recycled rally chant. Rhetoric replaces policy, glittering phrases masking the lack of substance. Johnston shows how Trump turns politics into infomercials, shouting promises like miracle cures, while the slogans collapse the moment they face the realities of governing.
Trump is very upset that there isn't a big demonstration supporting him, says Karen. Maybe this tide is changing. Do you feel the support is eroding, or do you think that just the fun is kind of lost from the carnival that is Trump?
Yeah, almost nobody is showing up to demonstrate. There are a handful of people outside the courthouse in Lower Manhattan. I think that's for two reasons. The first is that people saw what happened in the effort to overthrow the government. There have now been more than 1,000 people who have been adjudicated, either pled guilty or were convicted in that case. And the ringleaders got 20 years and 22 22 years, if I recall correctly, more than 20 years. And I think Donald's support, as I predicted on this show a long time ago, is waning over time. On the other hand, people should not be complacent. He's back in the White House, even if the popular vote goes against him, as I predict, by more than 10 million votes.
Even Trump's myth as a master dealmaker collapses under Johnston's lens. The so-called art of the deal becomes, in his telling, the comedy of the con. Failed casinos, half-finished projects, and unpaid creditors shred the narrative. Real dealmakers leave thriving enterprises. Trump leaves lawsuits, bankruptcies, and ruins for others to clean up. His record isn't a triumph, it's a cautionary tale. Johnston saved some of his sharpest blows for Trump's hunger for validation. Past presidents built legacies through leadership. Trump chases headlines and applause like a performer desperate not to be forgotten. Johnston underscores the absurdity of a commander-in-chief who measures success by crowd size and TV ratings. This isn't governance, it's entertainment, and not good entertainment at that. He acts less like a statesman and more like a contestant, terrified of being voted off a reality show he mistakenly turned into a nation.
Spent his entire life gratuitously involved with criminals. In my book, The Making of Donald Trump, there's a whole chapter about Donald's up to his eyeballs involvement with his business partner, Joseph Wexelbaum, who is a 3-time convicted heavyweight felon who confessed in writing, I have his handwritten confession, to being one of the biggest drug traffickers in America, and Donald did the most extraordinary.
Then comes the family dynamic. Johnston shows how Trump sells loyalty and dynasty, but the reality is a fractured empire held together by branding. His children aren't heirs to brilliance, but actors in a family commercial, playing roles to keep the illusion alive. Trump markets his offspring as extensions of his brand, turning family into merchandise. It's dynasty as theater, born not of legacy, but ego. International affairs, too, become fodder for Johnston's roast. Trump boasts of toughness abroad, but Johnston sees only bluster. Foreign leaders spot the insecurity beneath the bombast, flattering him into concessions. The so-called master negotiator becomes a man mistaking polite manipulation for respect, an easy mark on the global stage, undone by his own ego.
Of course, Donald paid off people to be cooperative. Alan Weiselberg, who got the $2 million, is right now sitting in Rikers Island, and there are bad jails, and then there's Rikers Island, for 150 days because he lied under oath at the persistent fraud trial before Judge Engoron. And this is how Donald does business. You know, he tried to bribe the late, great Wayne Barrett, the first journalist who got onto Donald and seriously began covering him. Wayne worked for 40 years for the Village Voice, and yet he had the most extraordinary sources in the FBI, New York detectives. I mean, he just was deeply, deeply respected by these folks who cooperated with him.
Johnston highlights Trump's obsession with controlling the narrative. Every criticism becomes fake, every unfavorable report a conspiracy. Johnston mocks the fragility of a president who can't face scrutiny without crying treachery. True leaders withstand critique. Trump rages, mistaking accountability for attack. Press conferences, midnight tweets, his constant need to dominate headlines, Johnston frames them as cries for attention, not leadership. Trump isn't shaping history, he's chasing relevance, terrified of silence that would reveal his irrelevance. Johnston turns this desperation into comedy, showing how the world's most powerful office is held by a man acting like an aging celebrity afraid of being forgotten. His most devastating point? Trump's presidency isn't an anomaly, but the natural extension of his life. Bankruptcies, bluster, lawsuits, branding, now scaled up to national proportions.
I haven't really seen, you probably have, but it's interesting to watch Trump flail a bit as this Epstein thing has blown up. And I haven't really seen him in a flailing that has continued this many consecutive days as we have seen now.
Oh, he's got a real tiger by the tail here. Trump was so clear that he would release these files. We now know why he doesn't want to do so.
Under Johnston's eye,
The United States becomes Trump's biggest casino, one he's eager to strip before the lights come on. The pattern is undeniable, and Johnston exposes it with clarity that shatters the myths. The self-made billionaire is revealed as a man propped up by loans, tax tricks, and inherited wealth. The populace is undone by decades of cheating workers and outsourcing jobs. The patriot is undone by foreign entanglements and personal profit. Piece by piece, Johnston tears away the costume until only a salesman remains, his greatest feat convincing people to buy the illusion. And Johnston isn't finished. For every contradiction revealed, another appears. Scandals multiply, lies metastasize, and the farce continues, fueled by a president addicted to attention and terrified of truth.
Now look online and see the entire Jeffrey Epstein birthday book. And I think the most revealing thing in there is not Donald Trump's letter with his sort of coded language about secrets and enigma, but the pages done like a childlike drawings with crayons or colored pencils, showing a group of very young girls, and then next to it a panel of what appear to be teenage girls, pubescent girls, and a naked Jeffrey Epstein, whom they're rubbing with body oil all over, and Mar-a-Lago in the back.
Johnston doesn't just laugh at the circus. He shows how every tent pole is crooked. Trump's success, he explains, comes not from strategy, but from leaving others to clean up his mess. Banks, contractors, even governments pay the price, while he boasts of victory. The irony is sharp. A man who never pays his debts convinced voters he could balance a national budget. Johnston also ridicules the obsession with spectacle, motorcades, flags as props, grand entrances crafted for applause. Leadership becomes theater, a Broadway knockoff in Washington. Real strength needs no orchestration, but without theatrics, Trump's hollowness is exposed. Johnston skewers his constant rewriting of history, failures recast as triumphs, setbacks spun into fake victories, like a student altering grades with a marker, then demanding praise. In Johnston's telling, Trump isn't a leader, but a salesman marketing himself. Policies are props, press events advertisements, and even the Constitution a backdrop. The danger, Johnston warns, is mistaking branding for governance. And the show has no ending. Each scandal overtakes the last, each lie buries the one before. The comedy rolls on because Trump refuses to step off the stage, keeping the punchline forever unfinished.